All right, what is up, guys? VV back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about building Z, building black, purple, Z, Zephyr, whatever people call them these days. This is kind of going to be one of those comprehensive deck builder style videos, so buckle up. We do got a lot to talk about. But I do think I have an interesting take on Z that I haven't seen yet, and I want to play test as soon as possible. But we're getting there. I am a little bit busy with my personal life at the current time, and I haven't been able to make a tournament about 2 weeks now. So, y'all bear with me, guys. And if anyone ever sees one of my ideas and wants to try it before I get around to it, please do. Right? I will not be upset if you try out some deck that I've been talking about and you put it together, make revisions, and talk about it in the comment section below. And speaking of which, I'm starting to work on a Discord as well, so that will be something we, hopefully we have like a little channel Discord soon for us all to use. I don't know, maybe I'll tie it some way, tie it into subscribers only. I don't know if you could do that on YouTube. We'll figure it out. It's not a big deal either way, but just it's nice to have those, so we can share we could talk about the new cards that are coming out and all that good jazz, all that good stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into this. So we're talking about Zephyr. Okay, so most importantly, just right off the bat, let's go ahead and bring up, the leader himself, and let's see how we can actually build around Zephyr. Whoops. So this is the leader. He's a dual color leader for black and purple. So at the average stats for that kind of leader is 5,000 power and 4 life. Okay, so let's look at the when attacking. Dawn -4. So his effect can only happen when you are attacking. It's not activate main, it is when attacking. Dawn -4, so you're going to return 4 Dawn cards, right? That's a lot. That's a steep cost. But it's a very powerful effect. KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. Then this leader gains plus 1,000 during this turn. So, it's too bad. I feel like literally if it was just Dawn -3, it would actually be that much stronger. Or if it's going to be Dawn -4, give plus 2,000, something along those lines, or make it a 4 or less. But either way, as is, it's still very powerful. But we have to build the deck around it in a certain way, right? And here's one thing that's really nice about the Dawn negative abilities, like the Dawn -X abilities where you have to return Dawn. It doesn't matter what state the Dawn is in. It just has to be, it says right here, you may return the specified number of Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck. So there's 3 active states for Dawn, right? There's active, rested, and attached. So this doesn't care what state it's in. It could be attached to a character, it could be rested, or active. Now we wouldn't want to send an active one unless we had to, right? But you guys get the point. So in other words, this leader probably lets us do some interesting things that you couldn't normally do. Like, for example, Sakazuki, the leader, right? Let me just bring up Sakazuki to show you guys. Will it show up on here? It might. Yeah, it does. Okay, cool. So this is Sakazuki. Now, his is a 3 cost once per turn where you trash a card from hand to KO a 0 or less, right? With a cost of 0 character. Well, you have to pay 3 Dawn. You're not returning 3 Dawn, you're paying 3, and you're trashing a card from hand, and you have to reduce the card's cost down to 0. So a leader like this is not practical when using cards like, let's just say Sewer right here. Hopefully y'all can see this okay. I'll read it otherwise, or just in case. On play, give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 to their cost during this turn. So if I wanted to KO something that costs 2, just that costs 2, I would have to play a Sewer from my hand, that's 1. I would have to pay 3 more to activate, what's his name's ability, Sakazuki's ability, so that's 4 Dawn investment. And then I will have to trash a card from my hand as well, just to KO a 2 or less, right? Now Z at least has the benefit of, it doesn't matter, like, you don't have to trash a card from hand, right? And you don't have to lower their cost past 3. So that takes out everything turn 2 and under, right? Like a 1 cost, 2 cost, or 3 cost. Now, yeah, for a 4 cost, you have to invest something, but it opens up some interesting possibilities, right? Where we no longer have to pay an additional amount. We can just pay 1 and KO a 5 or less with a card like Suru, right? we can just... Now, this card really piqued my interest here. Shirahoshi, the 4-cost that came out in ST08. For those who can't see, let me go full screen and blow this up a little bit bigger. Y'all should be able to see it just fine. But anyway, this is the card I'm talking about. This is a 4-cost 0-power defender, or blocker, excuse me, with a 1k counter. So it's always pretty relevant, right? Except when you need to attack, you're not going to be attacking realistically with a card like this. But it has, on play, give up to one of your opponent's characters -4 cost during this turn. Well, all of a sudden, by playing this 0-power blocker, this 4-cost 0-power blocker, we can return 4 Dawn cards and KO a 7 or less with our Z, right? And same idea with Subaru, we can get a 5 or less, right? So that is something very interesting to look at. There's a few other cards we're going to look at as we get to them, but just to kind of give an idea, cards that we would have never played otherwise, right? Like cards we would never realistically play, like Henna. This is the other one I was looking at. 3 costs 5,000 power, on play, give up to one of your opponent's characters -4 their cost. Okay, well, all of a sudden, you know, say we play this on turn 4 or 5 where we have 8 to 10 Dawn down, right? 7, well, I should say 7 to 10 Dawn down. If we play this for 3, well, all of a sudden, we can KO a 7 cost or less with our leader's ability and still swing for 6 with the leader, right? So that's something we need to consider when building a deck. So we're going to go through the cards real quick, and then I have one deck that I built, you know, from this, and I want to share it with y'all, see what y'all think about it, and we'll brainstorm. So, okay, so I'm just going to leave it real big like this where y'all can read it a little easier on YouTube. I think I can go even a little bigger. There we go. Nice. And we'll take off these things. Perfect. Okay. So, one last thing I want to mention is Z is a film/Neo Navy. Now, Neo Navy doesn't do anything for us. That's not really a legitimate keyword yet in the game. Who knows, in the future, maybe it will be. But currently, his only relevant keyword is film. And that's something we need to consider, because there are some film cards we're going to look at. Okay, so let's hop into it. So first up is Suru, just a 1-cost, 2k counter, on play, give -2 to the cost of a character, you know, for the turn. Now, this card in Z is actually very strong as a 2k counter. Suru is just always good, right? You know, subtracting someone's cost by 2 for 1, that's just always good. But for Z, it says, okay, now I can KO a 5 or less if I have to use the on play. It's always good as a 2k, right? So I don't need to say much there, but this card is definitely a serious consideration if we're going to make a Z deck. Next up is Buena Fiesta. Now, this is a film searcher that is also a 2k counter. It's a 1-cost 2k counter film top 5 searcher. That, you know, if we choose to make a film version of the deck, which I do think is possible, by the way, you know, we're not down there yet, but there are cards in here that I've added that are, in fact, you know, film cards, like even Uda here, right? This is a 2-cost film card that -2s as an activate main and can't be KO'd by leaders. So, you know, this card, I think they definitely made this card with, what's his name in mind, with Z in mind. But something we have to think about, right? And I do have some OP04 stuff sprinkled in here as well. So, all right, so let's keep going. Next up, we have Makino, the 2-cost, 2,000 counter East Blue character that's in the black color. On play, if there's a character with a cost of 0, on play, if there's a character with a cost of 0 in play, draw 1 card. So not as strong for what we're trying to do, but it's always worth talking about 2k counters. Okay, next up is Shirahoshi. I already kind of talked about this. I think she's really just an absolute beast in this deck. Because, okay, we want to stabilize the board. And in order to do that, we're going to have to KO as many turns as possible with our leader's ability, right? As soon as possible. So just generally speaking, I think we want to build pretty low to the ground and not necessarily swing wide, but, you know, get some blockers that are wide and then stabilize by KOing every turn through really efficient, you know, characters like this. I say very efficient. In Z, I should specify. Normally speaking, Shirahoshi would not be the strongest card. Not that she's a bad card, but she's a 4-cost blocker that's a 0 power, right? So that's a little bit limited, especially for just that on-play effect. But, like I was saying, in Z, all of a sudden, that effect is just icing on the cake, right? We're getting a 4-cost 0 power blocker that's also 1k counter in hand. That's going to also help us turn on Z's ability. Okay, so I think this would be an all-star in the deck currently. I do think this is the direction we should be building Z. Okay, next up is Nefeltari Vivi. This is also from the ST stuff. A lot of good stuff came from ST for Z, in my opinion. This character is good. Just the 3 cost, 1,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. I think we see this in every color. Like Brule is the yellow version of this card. Boa Hancock is a blue version of this card. It's a pretty common stat line. 3 cost, 1,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker that has trigger play this card. Okay, so just something we need to think about. Next up is Kobe. 4 cost, 1,000 power, 1,000 counter, activate main. You may rest this character, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. I don't really think this is what we need in the deck, but I did at least want to mention this card because it does have potential. It depends on how you want to build the deck. Like if you chose to make a Navy version of the deck, which is another option, instead of like film or just all over the place. Because I will say this, the build that I'm running is pretty much all over the place. I'm just putting in the best combinations I could find. But if you wanted to make a Navy version, Kobe might have a spot in there. It's hard to say. Next up is Haguma. 1 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter. Give up one of your opponent's characters -2 costs during this turn. So, I mean, just nice. This is kind of like Suru's effect, but it's a more aggressive body instead of being a 2k counter. Okay. Next up, we have 2 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker and Domino. This is just an Impel Down card, which I don't think we would want to run Impel Down, but I included it just in case. It's there just in case. Same thing with Don Quixote Rocinante. 2 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. That's legitimately all it is. like that's it. If you're gonna run, you know, cards that search up 2k counters, or excuse me, 2 cost 2k blockers, because I think Hannibal can be. Yeah, I don't even have him on here, but let's just look real quick. Hang on one second, guys. I'm pretty sure you can grab Hannibal, or you don't have to have your leader. All right, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck. Reveal up to 1 purple Impel Down type card other than Hannibal. Now, it is purple exclusive. That's interesting. But that's okay. That's all we have in here. That's Impel Down. Add it to your hand. Place. Yeah. So you could technically run it like that if you chose to, but I don't know. I just have it in there just in case. Same thing with this, with Ideo and Chimney and Gonbi. They're just extra options. And same thing with Black Maria. Or Black Maria, however you say that. And same thing with Suru. Okay, moving on. So now we have Basil Hawkins. This is a 4 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter. Play this card trigger that has on play, add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck to your cost area rested. Just a decent ramp card, but I think we have better options. In fact, this next card I think is a better option. This card's a serious consideration, but I actually think we have a better 4 cost card that would fit this spot, even though it's not a 1k counter, which we'll talk about later. Okay, so next up is 2 cost, 3,000 power ulti, which has on play, pay 1, add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck, and rested. So this is our 3 drop in the deck. This is how I see this card. This is like a 3 cost character in our deck, where we always want it for that on play ability. Because think of it like this, guys. Like, one thing you have to consider, yes, it's nice to ramp with these cards, but it does a lot more than that. Because if we're returning 4 Dawn cards per turn, like probably starting around turn 3, well, we need ways to get our Dawn back, or else we're just going to fall too far behind. Realistically, we just won't be able to catch back up, unless we're about to win the game or something. You know what I mean? But yeah, so we need to really consider going cards like ulti here. Very solid card though, for what we're trying to do. And in fact, I do think this is a good option for us for the deck, at least for the version that I'm kind of suggesting we should start building towards. But who knows? It might not be good. It might be good. We'll see. I have Kurozumi Higurashi because this card is just, it's a stat line we probably won't see anymore unless they change the direction of the game. Because it's a 2 cost, 3,000 power blocker with 1k counter. That's unheard of now. Like, they've amended that. This is what a 2 cost blocker looks like with a 1,000 counter. Always. It'll always be a 2 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. Like, you can see it straight down the line for every one of these cards, and you'll find it in every single color. However, purple has something from OP01, you know, from the base set before they probably established, like, what needed to be, you know, how do you say it? Like, what needed to be default. And this card slipped through. This is a 2 cost, 3,000 power blocker, 1,000 counter. Yeah. Not that it's like an insanely good card, just that it's overstated for its cost. So, very solid. Okay, next up we have a 2k counter that has triggered Dawn -1 to play this card in Shiki. It's a 2 cost, 3k, you know, 2k counter. That's all it is. Same thing with Garp. You know, I always like to include the 2K counters just to make sure everyone has those in their mind when they're trying to make the deck for themselves. But 2 cost, 3K counter, 2K or 3,000 power, 2K counter, Monkey D Garp. I don't think either of these are really good for what we're trying to do because we don't want to lose any Dawn realistically because we're going to be Dawn -4ing from our leader's ability. And same thing with Garp. We're not really reducing the cost to 0. We're trying to reduce the cost to 3 because then we can start KOing things. We can start to KO things with our leader. Okay. Next up is brand new. 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter character. Navy Searcher. Look at 3 cards from the top of your deck. Reveal 1 Navy type other than brand new. Add to your hand. Trash the rest. Okay, y'all know what brand new does. If we choose to go Navy, this is obviously the direction we'd want to go with like Pro Searcher. Here's another version of a 2 cost blocker, by the way. This is what you'd expect for a 2 cost, 3,000 power blocker. No counter, right? But that's what was so special about this card, Kurozumi Higurashi. He just doesn't fit the pattern. However, this one doesn't either because it loses that counter. That's supposed to counteract it. And remember, Anne is a film card from the ST set, the Shanks set. So this is meant to combo with the leader. So that way when you get the plus 2K, you know, from Shanks' leader ability, now she's swinging for 5, right? Just so everyone kind of sees what Shanks is in case they don't know. This is the card we're talking about from ST05. Your film type characters gain plus 2K power during this turn. So that's why that card is printed the way it is, so that it can combo where it's a blocker, but then with Shanks it can also attack if you use it. But we already know how the Shanks decks turned out, unfortunately. Okay, next up is Karina. But by the way, this is a film character, so that is important if we choose to try like a film variant of the deck, which is very possible. Like, you know, Shiki was a 2K counter. Here's one. Buena Fiesta was the searcher for it. It is very possible to go film, and potentially very strong. Okay, so let's get back to here. Karina, 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter. Activate main once per turn. Rest this character, and then you may trash 1 film type card from your hand. If your opponent has more Dawn cards on their field than you, add 2 Dawn cards from your Dawn deck and rest them. This card alone makes me want to attempt going film with Z, because I mean, consider how strong that is. Okay, so let's just talk about where's Z at. So you're gonna get 2 Dawn every turn, right? You're going to add 2 Dawn just as a normal rule in the game, right? That's just how the game works. You get 2 Dawn every turn. Well, if you're reducing 4 Dawn every turn, you're going backwards. Right, just no matter what. Even if you use a card like Basil Hawkins right here that adds a Dawn or ulti, you're still going backwards, right? But a card like Karina here, well, that all of a sudden, you know, that's now we're not going backwards. And if we can just get to 6 or 7 or 8 Dawn and just never go backwards, well, that's all we need, right? I think that's kind of all we need in a deck like this. Now, yeah, the odds of her staying alive, you know, you do have to rest it. I get it. But this is potentially a very powerful card in what we're trying to do in Karina. Okay, so something we have to consider. And if we do go the film variant, this is an absolute auto-include, right? 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter. Those stats are fine for someone who has an effect this strong. Okay, next up. 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter. This is play this card. You know, Scarlet, this is just a flat-out, you know, trigger, play this card. Nothing too special. This kind of shows you how strong Shiki is, why he has to have Dawn -1 for his trigger effect, because he's a 2 cost, 3,000 power, 2,000 counter. You know, so it's just a straight up better card than Scarlet. But Scarlet doesn't require you to Dawn -1 to play it. So, kind of depends what you're going for. But he is filmed. They're both filmed, so that's important to note, you know, to take note of. They both can trigger, come into play, and they're filmed. Next up is the 2 cost Helmeppo. This is the 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter Helmeppo that has on play give up to one of your opponent's characters -3 to their cost during this turn. Okay, so again, we're going back to Z. We're thinking of Z. We're keeping Z in our mind, right? We're talking about Zephyr. Remember, if you're -3ing them, well, now all of a sudden you're hitting a 6 or less. And, excuse me, and this Helmeppo is a 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter character. So this is something, it looks like, you know, some of these cards, you have to remember, excuse me, guys. Sorry about that, my throat. You guys, you have to remember, some of these cards will not look good in your mind at first glance. But given who the leader is that we're dealing with, they're actually a lot stronger than, than they normally would be just looking at them in like a deck like Sakazuki. Because like I was saying with Sakazuki, this card just seems awful, right? Because you're going to have to pay 5 to KO a 3 or less and trash a card from your hand if you use Helmeppo, right? Well, how does this sound? Pay 2 and KO a 6 or less and you don't even trash a card, but you return 4 Dawn cards to your Dawn deck. I don't know. For me personally, the latter sound, the second one I said, sounds way stronger, right? Okay. Very, very strong. All right, so next up is Uda. 2 cost, 3,000 power. This just came out in the new starter set with Luffy. No counter, but this character has a very powerful effect. This character cannot be KO'd by battling against a leader, period, right? So the leader can't take her out. They have to have a character down to take her out. And it has activate main, rest this character, give up to one of your opponent's characters, cost 2, that costs, okay, let me try to read again. You may rest this card, give up to one of your opponent's character costs -2 during this turn. So now, with this card down, you can KO a 5 or less at all times with Z, right? As long as you can return the 4 Dawn. That becomes the balance we're trying to find in the Z deck. Is, like, realistically, with Z's ability, we're swinging for 6k every turn very easily, and we're KOing a character every turn if we can get the Dawn, right? If we can supply enough Dawn, we can just smash through. So just something to consider. This Uda, and it's a film card. So if we're gonna, let me see it real quick. Does Buena go purple only? No. Reveal 1 film type card other than Buena Fiesta and add it to your hand. So that's good. So you would be able to search up Uda with Buena Fiesta. So very, very potentially powerful card for what we're trying to do. Helmeppo, same idea, where this is a 3 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter card. Trigger, play this card. But so this card is good, but it's not quite as strong. It's not quite as strong as it would be in another kind of cost reduction deck, right? Because this is really like you're not trying to reduce the cost of your enemy's character, your opponent's characters to 0. You're actually just trying to reduce their cost to 3, right? Because that's when we can start smacking them down with our leader's ability. So very, very powerful, but this card, it's still good. I don't want to make it sound like this card's not good, but it's not quite what we're going for, right? And in fact, it's really the opposite of what we're going for, because what we would want to do is we'd want to swing for 5, like 5k or more, and -3 something over, on the opponent's board, so that it gets in range of us to KO with our leader. And typically speaking, it probably won't be 0, right? Because in fact, it'll never be 0, because we can already KO something that's a 3 or less. That's why I don't think I even added Kobe to the list, because the card makes no sense in the list, right? Like, why would we run Kobe when we can just I don't think I added him, because why would we run that? His effect is on our leader's ability, is on our leader's effect. We don't need that. We don't have to play Kobe and trash a card. We can literally just play a card and destroy their character at the same time. So this Helmeppo kind of goes against what we're trying to do, but it is still a very strong card. And if you can invest the 2 Dawn to him, then the effect is still relevant, right? Even if he's not getting to 5k, it's still relevant to help us KO things that are 5 and less. So very nice. Next up is Fukuro. This is almost an auto include in any deck that splashes black. 3 cost, 3,000 power, 1k counter, cannot be KO'd by effects, blocker, CP9 package. Excellent. Bartolomeo is coming out in Dressrosa with OP04. It's a 3 cost, 3,000 power blocker, 2k counter. Not a lot to talk about there, but very solid 2k counter, good utility. Next up is Sasaki, or Sasaki, however you say that. 3 cost, 4,000 power, 1,000 counter, on play, return 1 Dawn card to your Dawn deck, draw a card. So just a nice draw card effect, but not much else. To be honest, I just have it on. It doesn't even have any relevant keywords for what we're trying to do. Next up, 3 costs, 4,000 power Tashigi, 2,000 counter. This has activate main. You may rest this character, give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 to their cost during this turn. So again, this is like the more aggressive version of Suru, right? But it is an activate main, so and instead of being an on play, it's still very good. but I think we have better options than Tashigi in the deck that we're trying to build. Okay, next up is Khalifa, the 4 cost 4,000 power, 2,000 counter purple version of Khalifa. Next we'll talk about the black version. This has, when attacking, Dawn -1, draw 2 cards and discard 1 from your hand. That's very good, right? That is very, very good. It's too bad that this is not a CP9 type. You know, that would have been so nice for what we're trying to do, because Khalifa, the black version, we're definitely going to be running almost undoubtedly, right? But anyway, this Khalifa is still very good. There's no doubt about it. This Khalifa is still very, very good. Let me check the volume over here, man. We're like rocking out. Okay, sorry about that. So anyway, we want to consider this card, but the other Khalifa might just be a little bit better. So 4 cost, 4,000 power, 2,000 counter, black, you know, CP9 Khalifa here. This is just on play, draw 2 and trash 2, then give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 to their cost. So remember, in a deck playing Z, this is pay 4. We can KO a 5 or less now because of her effect. And we're gonna cycle through 2 cards as well, and we establish a 4K body if we have to play this card. Again, it's mainly meant to be a 2K counter. Everyone knows that. However, we still have to consider the fact that, you know, this card is a potentially very strong card in what we're trying to do. Okay, moving on. 3 cost, 5,000 power, Hina. This is the Navy card. This isn't the blocker version, but this is the version that does have on play, give up to one of your opponent's characters -4 to their cost during this turn, right? That's actually huge, right? Because this is a 3 cost 5K, so it has very aggressive stats. But not just that. This is going to let us KO a 7 or less, right? This is letting us take out 7 cost characters with our leader's ability, and we're establishing a 5K body. So in this kind of deck, that's actually very relevant, right, guys? That's actually very, very strong. So we have to really consider Hina. Next up is Kuzan, 4 cost, 5,000 power, Navy, you know, no counter, just like Hina. On play, draw a card, and by the way, we don't have a lot of card draw, so that's more relevant than you'd think in this deck. And then when attacking, give up to one of your opponent's characters -4 to their cost during this turn. That when attacking is good, but if we were to play Kuzan, that would just be icing on the cake. We would really just be playing it for a 4 cost, 5,000 power, on play, draw 1 card. You know, yes, he would still be able to do his when attacking, and we'd be able to hit 6 or less, or 7s or less with it. But the thing is, I think people who play black decks know Kuzan eats a Jet Pistol pretty much every single time, right? Because they can't use Jet Pistol on Borsellino, they can't use Jet Pistol on Fukuro, so he ends up kind of being like the first relevant target they can hit, and they're like, oh good, yeah, I was hoping I could use this card this turn, right? You know what I mean? So, okay, so either way, very strong card, but I don't know if we can squeeze him into the deck that we're making in the direction we're going. Maybe. Kuzan's never a hard no, because he can draw a card. He can't, you know, he replaces himself every time. But still something we have to think about. Okay, next up is Borsellino. 4 cost, 5,000 power, 1,000 counter. Everyone knows this card, right? It's a blocker that has, on opponent's turn, plus 1,000 power and cannot be KO'd by effects. Okay, don't need to say much about him. This is an auto-clued in what we're trying to do, to be honest. Okay, so this is the 4 cost I was talking about earlier that I think is just a little bit better than Basil Hawkins for what we are trying to do. 4 cost, 5,000 power, on play, add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. It's a 4 cost 5K. Like, this is almost priority over Kuzan, right? Because it's ramping us. It's allowing us to replace the Dawn that we're throwing away all the time. And it's a 4 cost 5K. It does its effect right when it comes into play, and then I no longer have to worry about it. I can turn it sideways for the rest of the game and not worry. So this card is a serious consideration for what we're trying to do. And it is a film card, so something we need to think about as well. Next up is Uda, 4 cost 5K blocker. On block, return 1 Dawn card to your Dawn deck. Rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. Okay, so that's, you know, this is just your 4 cost 5K blocker with a 1K counter. For purple, this is their version of Borsellino. And yeah, I know Borsellino is 1,000 times better, I get it. but this is what they get. This is their version of this cost card. The 4 cost 5k blocker with a 1k counter. That's a standard. That's a default type, right? It's okay. It is film searchable, but it's probably too slow for what we're trying to do. Not that it's a bad card. It's just a little slow for what we're trying to do. And we want to be real careful with our Dawn minus abilities. They have to be extremely relevant in order for us to actually include them in the deck, because we're going to be returning so much Dawn with our leader ability. Okay? All right. Next up, X-Drake. 5 cost, 5,000 power, 2,000 counter. On play, Dawn -1. Your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. So this card is good. However, we are probably going to be more interested in, you know, using it as a 2k counter in this kind of deck. But it is Navy searchable. It is worth mentioning. And it's a 5 cost 5k, so it's at a relevant stat line, 2k counter. The on play is really not that bad, but we don't want to return too much Dawn from other effects. Okay, but not bad overall. Yeah, I just noticed there's like a typo on this card. See where it says OP0, and that's it. It just says OP0. That's interesting. Okay, next up, we got Virgo. Another 2k counter, 5 cost 5k, Dawn ×1. This character cannot be KO'd by battle. So it's kind of a cool idea. Like, maybe this ends up going in a deck where we're running the Uda card and Virgo as a 2k counter, where all of a sudden we have 2 cards that just basically are invulnerable to our leader's, or our opponent's leader. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just think that'd be kind of interesting. Okay. Next up is Miss All Sunday. This is OP04. So this is coming out in about a month, at least about a month from the time you're recording this. 5 costs, 5,000 power. On play, add up to 1 rested Dawn card to your cost area. If you have 6 or more Dawn, draw 1 card. So again, you play her right on turn 3 if you're on the play, where you have 5 Dawn exactly. If you play this, well, you go to 6, and then you'll draw a card from that on play effect. Trigger is kind of the opposite, right? So you have to be at 7 with the trigger, right? So for Miss All Sunday, if you get her off the trigger, if you have 7 or more Dawn, let's just say you have 7, you'll return 2 to go to 5. Her on play will trigger, and you'll go up a Dawn to go to 6, and then you'll be able to draw a card. But you can still play her before then. You just won't get the on play draw card effect. You'll get the on play Dawn increase effect, but not the draw card effect. So keep in mind how many triggers we've looked at, by the way. We've looked, you know, Miss All Sunday, Helmeppo, Scarlet, Shiki, Basil Hawkins, Nefeltari Vivi. There are actually quite a few trigger cards that we've looked at. So it is something to think about, right? That's a direction we could go in the future, maybe. We'll see. This card I will almost undoubtedly use. The Miss All Sunday card, I will almost for sure be playing with this card once OP04 hits, if I continue with the Z deck. Okay, moving on. Just a CP card. I just think the 4 cost 6k vanilla cards are so powerful. 1k counter, you know, like I said, 4 cost 6k power, 1k counter vanilla cards, very powerful, especially when they're searchable or they, you know, they have some synergy with your deck. Next up, Douglas Bullet, film card, 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter, very solid stat lines. On play, Dawn -1, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So that is definitely nothing to scoff at. That's nothing to overlook. That is a potentially very powerful ability there in what we're trying to do. Allows for very good board control. Next up is Magellan. I don't know about this card and what we're trying to do, but I also don't want to rule it out because it is just an extremely powerful card. 5 cost, 6,000 power. On play, Dawn -1. Your opponent returns 1 of their Dawn cards on the field to their Dawn deck. And on opponent's turn, when this character is KO'd, your opponent returns 2 of their Dawn cards on the field to their Dawn deck. So it's just a good way to establish a very sticky body, or if they want to remove it, they're going to be punished. Yeah. Okay. But not necessarily what we're going for, to be honest. I think this would be going down a path we don't want to go down. All right, so let's keep going. Henna. 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. On block, choose up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. The chosen character cannot attack during this turn. Yeah, this is incredible. It's 6,000 power as well, so it's very easy to counter out of that if you need to, like to block with her. And then you're not locking down a 6 or less. Just, yeah, very, very strong blocker. Henna is very strong. Okay, next up is Polly. 5 costs, 6,000 power, no counter. On play, pay 2. So just read this card as a 7 cost 6k right away, right? Because you want to get the full potential out of it. Add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. Then, if you have 8 or more Dawn cards in play, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So again, you kind of need to see this as a 7 cost card, right? So you pay 7, KO of 4 or less, and you ramp a Dawn. But again, this is not really what we're going for. But it is a decent card that maybe in the future, maybe we change the direction of the deck in the future. But I think currently as is, I don't think we're trying to do something like this. Kaku, if we're going to go a CP package, you know, this is just a nice 5 cost 6k 1k counter that has a good on play to KO a 3 or less. If you can return 2 CP cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck. I think if we were to try to go with Kaku, I think we would actually be, I don't know, I don't, so how do I say this? His effect is already printed on our leader, and it's way less specific. Like, we don't have to return anything except for Dawn cards, which we're constantly adding every turn, right? And what I suggest is we ramp Dawn cards, so that way we have plenty of like ammunition, quote unquote, you know, so to speak, ammunition. But if we do choose to go like a CP Navy package, this card could be very decent in there. Okay, next up is Bluno, 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter as well. Just an incredible stat line. I think we're going to see quite a few of those if you haven't noticed. 5 cost, 6,000 power all the way down the line here. Some have counters, some don't. But Bluno has a counter, and it's Dawn ×1 to give him blocker. And on KO, play up to 1 character card with a cost of 4 or less with CP and its types from your trash and rest it. So this is one of the reasons you run Kumadori. This is one of the reasons you'd run, where is she? Khalifa, Fukuro, all that good stuff. He just has great synergy there. Okay. I don't know if that's where we want to go with the deck, but it's always an option. It's like a nice little 10 to 12 card package, right? I would actually, it's probably like somewhere around a 15 card package where you'd want to run 4 Kumadori, 4 Khalifa, 4 Fukuro, that's 12, and then run like 3 Bluno. Or run 4 Bluno and 3 Kumadori, you know what I mean? You can mix it around. So it's anywhere from like a 12 to 15 card package. You can splash in any deck that runs black. So not bad. Next up is Sabo, 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. This is OP04, by the way. On play, your characters cannot be KO'd by card effects until the start of your next turn, and then you cycle 2, draw 2, trash 2. I can't wait to get my hands on this card. That's all I can say. I think Sabo is going to be... Sabo, Fukuro, and Borsellino, I think is just the future of all black decks, you know what I mean? Like, there might be some exceptions. Obviously, with Rebecca, you might go more Dressrosa, but I think you guys know what I'm saying. Sabo's value is just off the charts. It's a 1k counter. It's a 5 cost 6k. It can block, has an on-play cycle and protection. I mean, it kind of does it all, right? The only thing it doesn't have is a trigger, which, you know, then it would literally be broken. Okay, but very good card. I think we would want to add this as soon as we can, whenever we can get this card in OP04. Next up is Xinjiao, or Qinjiao, however you say that. 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1k counter. This is also an OP04 card. I just think this is a decent card. I've mentioned this in other videos, I think. It's Dawn ×1. When this character battles and KOs your opponent's character, draw 2 and trash 2 cards from your hand. Like, that's just so nice, right? Cycling through cards, you know, that way you can sift through and look for 2k counters, get rid of dead cards in hand at certain points in the game that don't have counters, and so on and so forth. And it's a 5 cost 6k body, and it's a 1k counter in hand. Just an all-around decent card. It kind of reminds me of Guild Tesser, which we're going to talk about in a minute. He's right across the way from him over here, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Next up is Uda, the 5 cost, 6,000 power. This is a promotional card. A lot of people probably have not even seen this card. It's a 5 cost 6k that has on play, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. So right away, I actually have to add 1 more card, guys. Sorry, don't bear with me, because it was another promo card that I don't know why I didn't add. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Let's go back down there. Sorry, guys. So there was... Oh, good. It went right next to it. They're both promo cards. These are both cards that would probably see play if they had 1k counters. It's one of those situations where it's like the card is almost where it needs to be. But Uda... Let's go back to Uda real quick. It's a 5 cost 6k that has on play, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. But it doesn't have a 1k counter. So that just... You know, it just hinders it so much. But it's still, I think in this deck, we will run it. Let me just say that, you know, in the deck that I put together that we're going to look at the end, I do think we run this card. Next up is Sengoku, another promotional card. 5 cost, 6,000 power, no counter, but it's like a mini Isho, right? Dawn times 1, so attach 1 Dawn. On your turn, all of your opponent's characters get -2 to their cost. Remember, Isho, which we're about to look at in a second, he just does -3. So it's not that much worse, right? Like, it is technically worse, but you're getting the effect 3 Dawn earlier. So something we definitely need to consider. And in a deck that's running, excuse me, Z as our leader, well, you're attaching 1 Dawn, and now you're hitting anything that's a 5 or less with your leader's ability. So that, I do think that's actually very relevant, right? Like that, I think we can benefit from that, at least potentially. Okay, but very good card, something we need to think about. Next up is Queen. I think everyone knows how strong this card is. 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter blocker. On play, Dawn -1 to draw 2 and trash 1. That's just really good. It's just like Khalifa, right? The 4 cost 2k counter Khalifa for purple. When attacking, though, this one's when attacking, Dawn -1, draw 2, trash 1. Whereas Queen is an on play, draw 2, trash 1. So your opponent can't stop you from doing it. That's what makes Queen really good. And generally speaking, that's what makes on-play abilities really, really good, right? Your opponent can't stop you from doing the on-play. So, very nice. Okay, so next up is Guild Tesoro, or Guild Tesoro, however you say that. He's a 5 cost, 6,000 power character, no counter, but when attacking, return 2 Dawn cards and draw 2 cards. That's just a flat-out draw 2. Now, yes, that is technically better to just draw 2 instead of draw 2, trash 2, like what Qin Zhao had. But Qin Zhao has the 1,000 counter, and you're not returning Dawn. You're just attaching a Dawn to swing for 7k. Right? Like, yes, you can still attach 1 Dawn to Guild Tessera, of course, or Guild Tesoro, however you say it. But I think you guys kind of get my point there. They're both very doable, but the more 1k and 2k counters your deck has, the more competitive your deck is as just a general statement. Right? Because you have more chances to counter out effectively throughout the game. So anyway, definitely a card. This is a film card, so it is something we need to think about no matter which way we build, you know, especially if we're going to build towards film. Okay. Next up is Monkey D. Garp, the 5 cost, 6,000 power, no counter. Activate main, trash 1 card in your hand, and rest this character. KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So again, I do add the card just because it's still potentially very strong. But I think if in a deck that we're running Z, I think our number 1 priority needs to be to ramp Dawn and reduce cost. Like, that's our number 1 thing. We don't need the KO effects. We have that built into our leader, and it's, you know, very usable as long as we can keep our Dawn up and keep their cost down. So again, not a bad card, but it's probably not what we're going for, at least not in my opinion. Next up is Jabra, just a 5 cost 7k. I don't know why this card's in here the more I'm thinking about it. I guess if you choose to go the CP package, this would just be a great 5 cost, you know, vanilla body. It does what it does. Okay, next up is Smoker, 5 cost, 7,000 power Smoker. This character cannot be KO'd by card effects. Dawn times 1, as long as there's a character that has a cost 0 in play, this character gains double attack. So again, this is kind of like the Helmeppo idea we looked at, the 3 cost Helmeppo. We're not really keeping characters Dawn down, but we potentially are, right? Like, there are ways we can do it, like with Uda, right? We can combine Uda with Helmeppo, or we can combine Suru or Tashigi with where was it? With Smoker to get their cost down, or Sengoku, or Isho, which we're about to go over, or Kuzan. Like, there's the potential to combo these with cards like Smoker, but generally speaking, Smoker's not a card we're going for, but the double attack might be something we need to catch up in certain situations. We'll have to see. We'll have to do some play testing. We'll have to do some brainstorming and see if that's what we need. Okay. So next up is Sakazuki. Now, this card is always good. It's a 6 cost 7k that has, on play, trash a card to KO a 5 or less. See, now there's a KO effect that I'm never upset with having, because a 5 or less hits so many relevant targets. It hits both Marcos, right? Now they might revive it, but the point is it hits them. It hits both Marcos. Excuse me. It hits Zoro, it hits Luffy, it hits Trafalgar Law, both Trafalgar Laws, the stand one and the bounce one. It just kind of hits so many relevant targets. So, I mean, this Sakazuki is just nice as is, but again, in a deck like what we're trying to build, Maybe we have room for it. Maybe we don't. We'll have to see. Next up is 6 cost 7k Rush Luffy for purple. The on-play Don -1. Trash a character that costs 5, that has a cost of 5 from your hand. This character gains Rush. So you'll have to make sure you have a lot of 5s. Like maybe that'd be a reason to run Smoker. Of course, there's a reason to run Queen, but then also cards like Udas and Goku, Guild Tessero, and so on. There's a lot of 5-cost cards we could run in this deck. So it's worth considering, but overall, probably not the direction we're trying to go. Next up is Rob Lucci, the 6 cost 7k CP9 Rob Lucci character. On play, you may return 2 cards with CP in its type or CP9 in its types. In its type from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order. This character gains Rush during this turn. Not really what we're going for, but if you're going to run any CP, it's definitely a card worth considering at all times. Next up is King, 6 cost 7,000 power King. On play, Dawn -1, K up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So I don't know a world in which we would ever run King over Sakazuki if we're running a purple-black deck where we can run either or. I feel like Sakazuki is just strictly superior, right? I think he's just strictly better. Some people could have the argument that, yeah, but I'd rather return a Dawn card than trash a card, and that is a very legitimate, rebuttal. But at the same time, we're going to have cards like Smoker, we're going to have cards like Garp, like Udas and Goku, where's what's his name, the 4 cost, Kuzan, Ain, depends on what we're running, but we're going to have a lot of cards that are potentially dead in hand as counters that we won't have time to play, that we could just trash with Sakazuki to KO a character. Yeah, it's like you're trading a card from your hand that you could not play in time with Sakazuki's ability to KO their character that's actually a threat. That's kind of the way that I see that. But overall, King is not a bad card. Maybe you run both in a certain kind of deck, right? Maybe there's a deck where you run both. I don't know. But generally speaking, I think that Sakazuki is just a better version of King. But then there's the 7 cost King. This is a 7 cost 7,000 power one. This is a Dawn -2, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less, and one with a cost of 2 or less. This is potentially very strong, but at the same time, I don't think any of these cards are the direction we're trying to go with the deck. And you'll see when I show you the deck that I put together. Now, there is a version you could run with these. Absolutely, like a more mid-range to controlled version, where it's absolutely possible to run these cards, of course. But I think there's a different version we should start going with the deck, or at least start considering, giving some thought to. But very interesting card here with King. Next up is Monkey D. Luffy, 7 cost, 7,000 power. This is from OP04. He can attack active characters, and you can activate his main to return 7 cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order to set this character as active, and then of course he cannot stand at the next refresh phase. But this card, you would have to run like a Navy Dressrosa package. Excuse me, because there is I didn't include Rebecca. I probably should have. Let's just do that right now. Hang on. Here, I'll go up to the top. We'll just throw the 1 cost Rebecca in. Okay, full screen. And this is the card I just added, is Rebecca. Just look at 3 cards top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Dressrosa type card other than Rebecca, add it to your hand, and trash the rest. So this will let you search for that Luffy, and then you can trash other cards, fueling your graveyard. And the same thing with brand new. Where did I put brand? Here he is. Where you look at 3 and grab 1 Navy and trash the rest. So that's going to give us some options, if we want to run Monkey D. Luffy right here. We don't have to. It's just an option. Okay, so let's keep going. This card is good, at which point, if we are going to run Monkey D. Luffy, let me see if I added it. We're going to want to run King Kong Gun. Yeah, I do have it. So, again, this is OP04 considerations or brainstorming, but it is something that we have to think about. It could potentially be very strong in just any deck as a 1 or 2 of splash card, because it's pretty much an alternate win condition in and of itself, right? Because if you can take 4 life off someone with 1 character and 1 card from hand in your event, the King Kong Gun, why would you not maybe splash like that? Is maybe run 2 Monkey D. Luffys and 2 King Kong Guns, especially in OP04 when you're probably going to be running Sabo, the 5 cost blocker over here my mouse is hovering on, and maybe some potentially other strong cards like even the 2K counter, where is it? The 3 cost 2K counter Bartolomeo. Anyway, just something to think about, which might also justify, a reason to run Chin Jiao, right? Because, I mean, on this card, it's a 5 cost 6k. You hit this with Monkey King Kong Gun, and now you're swinging for 12k, double attack, draw 2, trash 2. You know, that's all of a sudden, that's very good. You know what I mean? Potentially, right? This is all potential. Okay. Next up is Isho. 8 costs, 9,000 power, Dawn ×1, -3 all your opponent's character's costs. And on play, if your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, trash 2 cards from your opponent's hand. So everyone kind of knows what this card is now. I think this just replaces Kuzan, to be honest. You're playing in a turn earlier, you know, it only has a 1 Dawn requirement each up. Like, it's kind of like your upkeep when you have Isho down. If you want his effect, you just attach 1 Dawn, and now your leader is KOing a 6 or less, right? And if we're running cards, like I mentioned, cards like, what's their name? Shirahoshi, I think it is. Where's old Shirahoshi at? Yeah. If we're running cards like Shirahoshi and you have that card down, well, now you're hitting any character in the game, right? Because you're reducing their cost by 3 with Isho's ability. You're reducing their cost by 4 with Shirahoshi and establishing a blocker. And then you're KOing 3 or less with your Z. That KO's a 10 or less, right? Just very, very strong. And the same thing with Hina, the 3 cost character right here. Give up one of your opponent's characters -4 to their cost. Kuzan as well when attacking, if we could pull that off. There's a lot of potential there. And I think Isho's kind of all we need now, and he's Navy searchable. I just have to mention that. I just kind of think, just moving forward with ideas of building Zephyr, even not even the version that I'm kind of gonna be talking about at the end of this video, Isho's kind of just the way to go, I think, because I don't know if we have the time in the current meta to reach 10 Dawn anymore. I don't know if that's a realistic possibility. You know, like, I mean, I would rather just play Isho and then KO a 3 or less on their side of the board by returning 4 Dawn, and then going up to 6 Dawn the next turn. Because remember, you'll go, if it's 8 Dawn on the field, you play Isho, then you return 4 Dawn, you'll be down to 4. Next turn you'll be at 6. Then you could just attach 1 Dawn to Isho, -3, and now you're KOing 6 or less for the rest of the game. And you have 5 Dawn to work with to play something like a Giltesro or a Queen or an Uda or a Sabo, whatever you're playing. It depends. But that's just, in my mind, that's what makes the most sense. I think Isho kind of just replaces Kuzan. Not that Kuzan's bad. Kuzan is extremely powerful. We're going to talk about him in a second. But in my mind, I don't know if the format is slow enough to establish Kuzan anymore. Okay, we'll talk about him in just a second. All right, next up is Kaido, the 8 cost 9,000 power dragon version of Kaido. This is a promotional card, but it has end of your turn. Add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active, not rested, but active. So if you could establish, I've done a little bit of play testing, and if you can establish this Kaido, this 8 cost 9,000 power Kaido, you're basically using your leader's ability every single turn with impunity, right? Like, you're just always getting your Dawn back. You're only going down by 1 Dawn at a turn, or at a time, and that's where you can make up with it with cards like Uda, with cards like Ain. Where is she? There she is, Ain. With cards like Miss All Sunday. With cards like, where's the one chick? She's a 2 cost card, isn't she? Yeah, cards like Ulti, or maybe even like Basil Hawkins, right? So just a lot of stuff going on there worth considering. I like this card, but it's not exactly practical. It doesn't have a counter. It makes us have to use cards like what we're about to talk about with these events, where the 0 cost trash a card events that get +3k counters. So we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, but overall, I like the card. It's just, it is a little impractical. The format's a little too fast to be running something like this. We'll see going forward in the future. So next up is Kaido. This is a 9 cost, 10,000 power Kaido that has on play Dawn -5. And you may KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. Then this character gains Rush for the turn. I don't like that we would be returning 5 Dawn cards, but this is a huge 10k body that has Rush and KOs a 6 or less, like all in one. So we have to at least consider it as like a 1 or 2 of potentially. Maybe not though, we'll see. Next up we have Shanks, 9 cost, 10,000 power Shanks on play. You may trash 1 card from your hand, KO all characters with a cost of 1 or less. Again, just not really practical. You'd be trashing a card from hand. It sits in your hand the whole game, you know, with no counter on it. It's just not practical, unfortunately, because I really like this card, but it's way too overcosted in my personal opinion. Like, honestly, I think Shanks should have been like They should have made like a young version of Shanks, you know what I mean? So that it would balance what I'm about to say with the power level. But like, it should have been like a 4-cost Shanks that is like maybe a 5,000 power and has this effect right here. Like, probably the same exact effect, but just way, way lower cost. It's so unrealistic. It's so unrealistic to pull this off, unfortunately, as much as I love this card and the art for it. Really nice art. Okay, next up is Kuzan, and this is kind of the combo piece for the whole deck. It's like, oh man, if I have Kuzan down, then I can just Shanks the whole board, right? Yeah, except you're just going to be dead by then, you know what I mean? Like, that's the unfortunate reality, right? Like, that's the unfortunate... That's the truth. You don't really have the chance to play this card right now. Kuzan has escaped most lists. I think it's made its way into a few Rob Lucci decks as like a 1 of or a 2 of, because even Rob Lucci decks are running Isho because they can just Navy search it, right? So it is something to consider. But 10 cost, 10,000 power is nothing to scoff at. It's nothing to ignore. This is a very powerful, stat line, and the effect just turns on everything. So there's a combo that goes with this card with Z, for those who don't already know it. Yeah, ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to, you drop this on turn 5. Let's say you go second where you're on the draw. So in other words, you're on an even curve, and you get to 10 Dawn on turn 5. Well, you drop this card for 10 Dawn. All of your opponent's characters lose 5 to their cost. You KO a 5 or less because of that with this on-play ability, and then you KO an 8 or less with your leader's ability. And all of a sudden, that was a 2-card board clear, a little semi or pseudo board clear. And now, you have a 10k on the board. You swung for 6 with your leader. That was supposed to be your way of getting the board back. But, unfortunately, it's just not as realistic anymore to get to this point in the game safely. Maybe it will be. Maybe if we make enough changes and do enough playtesting, we can get back to that point. Because I do think that Zephyr is largely unexplored. Because maybe we should be just blitzing to 10 Dawn by running cards like Miss All Sunday, running cards like Ain, running cards like Ulti, running cards like Basil Hawkins, and then nothing but blockers, and then just blitzing to 10 Dawn so that we can drop Kuzan and start KOing the board. But then it becomes a matter of how consistent is the deck, right? There becomes a battle of consistency. So anyway, something to think about. Very strong card. Like I said, I love this card. I hate that it's former Navy, so that it's not Navy searchable. I think that's very frustrating. Let's just leave it there. but it's very frustrating, but at the same time, it is what it is. We got to learn to deal with it or, move past it, right? Very strong card, but I do think the current state of the game is a little too fast for Kuzan. In OP04, maybe we'll get a chance to play it, or in OP05, who knows? We'll have to see. Okay, so that's it for the characters. So now we're going to look at a few events, or quite a few events. It was like 4, 8, 12, 15 events. Okay, so let's go ahead and knock these out, and then we'll talk about the deck that I put together. So first up is a Gum Gum Jet Gatling. This is a 0-cost counter that has you may discard 1 card from your hand, and then up to one of your leader or characters gains plus 3,000 power during this battle. This one also has the trigger of add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. That's actually pretty relevant for what we're trying to do, right? Number one, it's going to help us. It's going to help justify us running cards like Isho that don't have counters, cards like Sakazuki, Smoker, Garp, Guild Tessero, Uda, Sengoku, all these cards that don't have counters, because there's a lot of them, guys. Magellan doesn't have a counter. Miss All Sunday doesn't have a counter. Ain doesn't have a counter. A lot of cards we want to run. Kuzan, Hina. A lot of these cards we actually want to run don't have counters. Like, y'all see that. But a card like, let me scroll back down. Cards like Jet Gatling and 6 King Pistol, which is the one right next to it we're about to read, they give us the potential to run those cards, right? And actually make it into the late game so that we can potentially win, right? So, something we definitely have to consider, and I actually run some of these Jet Gatlings in the version I'm going to show you all in a minute. Next up is 6 King Pistol, like I was saying. It's just the exact same thing, but a black version where the trigger's different. The triggers draw 1 card, then KO up to one of your opponent's characters that costs 1 or less. The actual text on the card is the exact same. You trash 1, you gain plus 3,000. Okay, next up is Ulti Mortar. This is a 1-cost, return 2 Dawn to your Dawn deck counter. Your leader or one of your characters gains plus 2,000 power during this battle, then draw 1 card. And the trigger is add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. That's going to be a common theme we're going for. I think this card's okay, but I'm not running it in the current list that I'm working on. Okay, but it is something at least to consider because like I said, card draw is going to be rough in this deck at first. We need more card draw, I think. I think that's our biggest weakness. So this is a card we have to consider along with another card we're going to talk about all the way at the bottom. Okay, next up is Hydra. This is a 1-cost Dawn -1 main event. Give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. That is a main effect. That is not a counter, guys. That is a main Dawn -1 effect. Okay? Not great, but it does let us, you know, how do I say it? It could help us get around big blockers like a Eustace Kid or something like that, or a Trafalgar Law, stuff like that. Something helps get around the big blockers. The trigger is weird, like Dawn manipulation type stuff, like with Magellan. Trigger, if your opponent has 6 or more Dawn cards, your opponent returns one of their Dawn cards to their Dawn deck. So that's okay. That's cute, right? But it's not really what we're going for. Next up is Ice Age. So actually, typically speaking, I think Ice Age is just a waste of a spot. Unless you're running something very specific, or if you're running it as like a 1 of or a 2 of as like a tech card. But in this deck, in Z, that's actually just pay 1 to KO an 8 or less, right? This, in your mind, this should read, you know, pay 1, your leader swings for plus 1,000 power during this turn, and you return 4 Dawn cards, and then you KO an 8 or less. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way you should read this card. Because remember, this gives -5 to their cost, and your leader can KO a 3 or less. So that's actually very good. And the trigger's decent, right? KO up to one of your opponent's characters cost 3 or less. Very decent. Okay. Next up, we have Blast Breath. This is like the version of Hydra that you want, right? This is the defensive version. 1 cost, return 1 Dawn card, counter. For this battle, your leader or one of your characters gets plus 4,000 power. Okay, this is like a Radical Beam, right? This is like this deck's version of Radical Beam. Definitely something we need to consider. Okay. Next up is Great Eruption. This, again, I think this card is actually insane in what we're trying to do here with the Z deck, because this is a pay 1 to draw a card, and then you get to KO a 5 or less by using your leader's ability, and then still, again, always swinging for at least 6k with that effect, right? Just awesome. The trigger's okay. You know, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. Maybe you run this in like a Navy version of the deck where you're also running X-Drake. Where is he? Did we pass him? I think we passed him. I don't even see X-Drake. He's a 5-cost card. It's got to be right in my face, right? Yeah, I'm probably just... Oh, here he is. X-Drake. It was the last one. So, you know, this is another Dawn -1. Make him trash a card. You've got Isha making him trash cards. You guys get the point there. Maybe you run Jack at that point, too. I don't know. I think because I believe there's a Jack that makes him trash cards as well. But the main idea is this. Pay 1 to draw a card. That's already good, right? Like, pay 1 to draw a card. Most people would run that card anyway. But in this deck, you're also dropping their cost by 2. And then you can just KO with your leader's ability anything that's a 5 or less. Right, and you can also combo this card with like your Shirahoshis. Now you're carrying a 9 or less, right? Just incredible potential value there. Next up is Thunder Bagua, which I think actually, you know, it is rare that I would run another 2-cost 4K counter over Impact Wave if I have the option. But in the deck that we're running, this is probably the better option, because we're going to be KOing nonstop anyway. You know, because Impact Wave KOs a 3 or less. Well, we have that built into our leader's ability. Yeah, the trigger gets a 4 or less, but still, how often does that happen, right? It actually, the more you play black, the more it happens, right? But you guys get my point. It's not as consistent as, you know, unless you're, you know, with black-yellow, you can make it a little more consistent where you can, you know, plan on having more triggers. But you guys get my point, I'm sure. Okay, but Thunder Bagua, this is a 2-cost 4K counter, and if you have 2 or less life cards, remember, we start at 4 life. We're running a dual-color leader, you know, in Z. So we're starting at 4. So as soon as we get down to 2, whenever we use this as a counter, it's a 4K counter for 2, and we're ramping a Dawn card, right? We're adding 1 Dawn card from our Dawn deck and resting it. And the trigger is the same thing as what we saw in Jet Gatling and Ulti Mortar, where it just trigger, add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck, and set it as active. Very powerful. This is the direction I think we need to be going with this kind of deck, I'm pretty sure. Hell's Judgment is good, and you know, it might just be a card we have to run in the current meta, but I would like to be able to get around it. But again, we might not have that option. But still a very good card. Okay, next up is Top Knot. I didn't even read. Sorry, guys. For those who don't know, Hell's Judgment is a 2-cost, return 1 Dawn counter. give up to 2 of your opponent's leader or characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. And it's during the turn. It's not just for that one battle, right? Very strong. And then trigger, if your opponent has 6 or more Dawn cards, your opponent returns 1 of their Dawn cards to their Dawn deck. So it's like, it's a Dawn manipulation, just like how, what was it, Hydra was and Magellan is. Okay. Next up is Top Knot. This is something we definitely want to think about, we want to talk about. So for 2 Dawn, and then return 2 Dawn on your main, return up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less to the bottom of its owner's deck. And then trigger, activate this card's main effect. That is going to help us get around Borsalinos, Fukuros, and even like Marco, the 4 cost, and even the 5 cost Marco if we can get down like an Isho. So I do think this is probably something we'll start leaning towards, you know, if we do enough testing. But anyway, just want to at least get this card in your mind, you know, the idea of this card in your mind. Next up is Impact Wave. This is a 2 cost 4K counter that lets you KO an active 3 or less. And the trigger KOs a 4 or less, no matter what their orientation is, whether they're active or tapped. I'm sure anyone watching my videos already knows what this card does very well. One of the best 2K counters, or 2 cost 4K counters in the game. Okay, next up is Gum Gum Bell. This is a 2 cost event. Main, you may add the top card of your life to your hand. That's a steep cost, but give up to 1 of your opponent's characters minus 7 cost during this turn. So literally speaking, this is a one shot. Like, you can KO anything in the game with this, with your Z, right? As long as it can be KO'd by card effects. You know, you can't get a Borsalino, we can't get things like that. But if it can be KO'd by card effects, this card can take it out with the Z. Just because that's a 10 cost right there. It's minus 7 and then 3 for Z. You got it. Trigger is kind of weird. It's not really great, but maybe it helps us get back like a brand new or an Uda, the 2 cost Uda film black card. Trigger, add up to is that a typo? Add up to 1 black character card with a cost of 2 or less from your trash to your hand. Okay. Not bad. Okay, we got 3 more here. Venom Road, 3 cost main. Add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. So it's just straight up ramp. But there's a card at the end here. If we would run a card like this, we would actually want to run the All-Star Calamities, in my personal opinion. But anyway, let's read it. Trigger, if your opponent has 6 or more Dawn cards, your opponent returns 1 of their Dawn cards to their Dawn deck. So again, more Dawn manipulation. Excuse me. And then we also have, you know, this card is good, but I think this the 4 cost card's a little bit better if we're going for that kind of effect. So next up is Gum Gum King Kong Gun. This is coming out of OP04. 3 cost main. Up to 1 of your Dressrosa type characters gains plus 6,000 power during this turn. Then, if you have 15 or more cards in your trash, that card gains double attack during this turn. So we've already kind of talked about this. You know, with Monkey D. Luffy, it's insane. It'll be just fine with Sabo if needed. Where's Sabo at? There he is. With Chin Jiao, it'll be fine. And there's a few others as well. You know, because think about it. Even like, where is Barto? With Bartolomeo, it's a 9K with double attack, right? You're paying 3 and you're swinging for 9 with a double attack. Excuse me. And the same exact idea with, where is Rebecca at? The 1 cost. Rebecca, you'd be swinging for 8. This is a 1 cost character that if you hit with Monkey King Kong Gun, you're swinging for 8K with double attack. So attach 1 more Dawn, you're swinging for like 9, which is a pretty magic number. Attach 3 Dawn and you're swinging for 11. Good luck blocking out of that, right? That'll cost a 2 cost 4K counter and a 2K counter and 1 more counter out of hand. Just unrealistic. And they invested all that for your 1 Dawn investment, right? Or excuse me, your 1 card investment from your hand. So that's just a card we always have to consider going forward once OP04 hits, especially with a trigger like this. Draw 3, trash 2 trigger, incredible, just incredible. Fuels your graveyard or your trash, whatever it's called in this game. It's drawing you cards. It's letting you cycle through the cards you don't need to get cards that are actually more relevant. Everything. This card has everything we want in an event, and it's pretty aggressively costed, which is nice. Okay, last but not least, we got this 4 cost All-Star Calamities. Draw 1 card, then add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck to your cost area, set it as active. Trigger, activate this card's main effect. So again, I feel like this is just a strictly better version than Venom Road. Now, yes, Venom Road does have the attack trigger, like it's an aggressive trigger against your opponent where you're like slowing them down. But we're not really trying to do that. We're just trying to speed up. And I would rather draw a card and add a Dawn rather than just add a Dawn and then that trigger being whatever it potentially could be. So, but yeah. So that's just kind of my thoughts. So, okay. So a lot of good like possibilities coming out of Black and Purple. And I'm really anxious to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below about in the comment section below about what you think is the best direction to go. Like, should we be leaning more towards navy? Should we be leaning more towards film? Should we be leaning more towards, you know, just whatever works, you know, like, or maybe more towards impel down? Should we try to go for something that has all these triggers in it? Because there's a lot of very, very powerful trigger cards we saw. Though I will say, so the version I'm about to show y'all, it is OP03 like friendly. You know, if that makes sense, like you can run an OP03, but OP04 is probably going to give us a lot better options than what we have currently. Because I think probably like a Dressrosa Navy combo where you're running 4 Rebecca's and 4 brand news, and then you're just running lots and lots of ways to, you know, counter out and establish blockers like Sabo that we're passing right now, and then maybe you don't even go a Dawn ramp strategy, like a mana ramp, quote unquote strategy, right? You just go, you know, you don't even go for Dawn ramp. You just set down these aggressive bodies and you just trade the whole time. You don't even go for their life if you don't have to. You just try to trade with what's on the board, set up your positioning, and win out like that. So, all right, so now we're going to go ahead and check out the version of the deck that I'm working on. All right. Let me like zoom in on this a little bit. 1 second, guys. Okay, so this is the version I'm currently working on. This is not finished. Actually, I do have to leave the... There we go. This is not finished, so don't be too harsh with your criticism. Definitely give some if you're like, hey, why don't you run this card or why don't you run this card? You know, give me some ideas. But this is the current version that I'm just working on. I've put it together and messed with it a few times, but again, like I said, unfortunately, like I was saying in the beginning of the video, I don't have a ton of time to play test like I want to, but I am still definitely making time for it no matter what, because I just enjoy playing this game, right? It's not like someone's twisting my arm. I just wish I had more time. So let's go ahead and run through this list, then we'll talk about it. So Z is the leader, of course, running 4 Subarus for a 2k counter, because like I said, the -2 ability. Actually, let me just go through all the cards real quick, then we'll talk about it. So running 4 Subaru, 4 of the new Shirahoshi from ST08, 4 of the ultis from OP01, the ramping one, 4 Fukuro, 4 Khalifa, the black CP9 version, 2 Hina, just as like a tech card, 4 Borsalinos, 4 Ain, 4 Uda, 4 Queen, 2 Ishos, 2 Gum Gum Jet Gatlings, 4 Great Eruptions, and 4 Thunder Bagua. So, like, just to give an idea of the stats down here, as you can see, running 16 Navy and 8 CP9 and 9 Film. So you see how it's kind of all over the place, and if you wanted to go down like one more than the other, you easily could. Like if you wanted to be more Navy, you could do that. If you wanted to be more Film, more CP, you name it. But I do think the Navy stuff. So let me kind of give an idea before I even say that. Like what I'm trying to do with this deck is be a little more aggressive up front, because before, like, notice how low the cost is in this deck. I only have 2 of this 8 cost card of Isho. Everything else is 5 cost or lower. What I'm trying to do, excuse me, is establish low cost bodies that have these minus abilities on them, so I can take out my opponent's characters. And like the more I think about it, like if I'll have to do some play testing, but the idea is like if I can take out my opponent's characters efficiently enough, then running Uda just becomes like a no-brainer, like something that I should definitely do. Where is they're talking about this Uda, of course. The 2 cost 3k power. This character cannot be KO'd by battling against a leader, so I wouldn't have to worry about my leader or my opponent's leader taking out my card, because remember, you have to rest this card just to use her ability. But if I can constantly take out a 5 or less every single turn, then, you know, all of a sudden that card would replace a card like Hina probably, or maybe a card like, well, probably not Shirahoshi. From the little bit of playtesting I've done locally, Shirahoshi has been an absolute monster. Like playing this card, I mean, it doesn't matter if she's a 0 power, she just eats up an attack. Like just see her as like using a counter out of hand. She's a 4 cost, 0 power blocker that has a 1k counter in hand, but the on-play effect is huge, right? Because number one, she costs 4. So just playing her means 4 Dawn is going to be rested, which you'll immediately be able to return with Z's ability. And then with Z's ability plus Shirahoshi's, you're KOing a 7 or less. Like, realistically, in the current meta, what is that not hitting? Like a Mihawk? You know, that's about it, right? You know, you're not hitting a Mihawk, you're not hitting an Edward Newgate. But don't worry, you actually can hit that very easily in this deck by either running Ishos, Great Eruptions, you know, using a 2K counter like a Suru or Khalifa in conjunction with like Shirahoshi or Hina, or whatever. You know, those are the main ones, but you get the point. But yeah, this deck, you notice how I'm running a lot of like ramp stuff in Ain and Uda, and as well as Ulti. But the worst part about these cards is they don't have counters on them. Sometimes I don't quite understand the logic behind making some of these cards. And I realize why purple's like almost not used at all, right? Because, I mean, I'm not saying it's not. Like, I think Magellan even just did really well in a recent tournament. But you guys see what I'm saying? Where it's like, you know, oh man, I want to run this cool card here, Aim, that is a 4-cost 5K that ramps me a Dawn. All right, well, sorry, but she has no counter. Oh, okay. Well, let me run this 5-cost 6,000 power promotional level Uda that has on play ramp a Dawn and rested. Okay, but she doesn't have a counter. Oh, you know, I don't know. And none of them do. Like, look, even Ulti. The only one that did, I think, was Basil Hawkins. If I'm not mistaken, let me scroll down to 4. She's a 4-cost. Yeah, the only card that like realistically you could run that has like Dawn ramp that has a counter is Basil Hawkins. And look at those stats. It's a 4-cost 2K, you know? Anyway. Sorry guys, not trying to vent to y'all. Y'all bear with me. But no, I think you guys see what I mean though. The only card that I have that returns Dawn outside of our leader's effect is literally Queen. Because Queen, draw 2, trash 1 is just so good. Like I said, we don't have a lot of card draw in the deck. We have 4 Queens, we have 4 Great Eruptions, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's basically it, unless you start using Khalifa for her on play, which is not bad in this deck, right? Because in this deck, she's a 4-cost 4,000 power body, draw 2, trash 2, and now you're hitting a 5 or less with her on play, plus your leader Z's ability. So everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Suru and Khalifa, they have -2 to the cost. Hina and Shirahoshi have -4 to the cost of characters. Ulti, Ain, and Uda are all ramp cards. Queen, Borsellino, Fukuro, Shirahoshi are all blockers. Tons of blockers. We're running 4 of the 2-cost 4K counters in Thunder Bagua. We have 2 of the Jet Gatlings to turn on some of these cards that are dead in hand when they're not on the field, like because they don't have counters. Just all kinds of stuff, right? We've got a lot of options here, a lot of cool stuff. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to take this to the next Friday event, Thursday, maybe even a Wednesday. I'm trying to think. No, realistically, it'd be like a Thursday or Friday event for One Piece in my area. But hopefully, I'll be able to take this. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, by all means, you know, don't be afraid to comment in the comment section below. I haven't given up on the GARP deck. I know I'm releasing this like almost right after I did the GARP video, but I wanted to get this out there and kind of run it by. I'll see what y'all think, because I'm not going to lie, playing GARP, I tried a version that was like Whitebeard, like more like Whitebeard flavor, and it didn't quite, I don't know, I'm struggling with the GARP deck. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm struggling with that one. Where this one too, it's all a struggle, right? There's a reason people don't run these leaders, but it's hard. After running the black-yellow deck and being pleasantly surprised, because I don't feel like I was struggling with that deck. With the black-yellow Charlotte Linland deck, I legitimately felt like I could compete against any deck in the format. Now, I might not win, and I might have like Law was a struggle for me. They might have a higher win rate against me, but I do feel like I could beat Law decks. It's just a matter of, you know, playing properly, getting proper pulls, getting to go second, things like that. But with the purple black and the red black combos, oof, you know, it is rough. I'm not gonna lie, but haven't given up on it. I'm gonna try my best with this stuff, and you know, sometimes you just have to wait for future sets to come out so you get more tools at your disposal. So, because that is one thing I'll say as well. I think when OP04 comes out, which is just around the corner, you know, at the time we're recording this, when that comes out, we're going to have a lot more options, right? Like, we're going to have options of, like, let me just type in Dressrosa. Oops. like then all of a sudden we have access to cards like this Rebecca to do some extra searching, right? Look at 3 cards at the top of your deck, reveal one Dressrosa type card other than Rebecca, add it to your hand and trash the rest. We're going to be able to combo that with all the 2K counters we get in Bartolomeo. We'll have access to Gum Gum King Kong Gun. We'll have access to Truno Bastardo, which is not necessarily what we would go, by the way. Like, I don't know if we'd go any of this, but we have all this new access to cards. And especially with this Trafalgar Law, like, no, never mind. I was thinking of, for GARP, sorry. The GARP, I just did the GARP video and I was thinking of this. But, Sabo, Monkey D. Luffy, Xin Zhao, even just Trafalgar Law, the 512-7K might just be a good beater in a deck like this. And Barrier as well. I think this might be a decent card as well in certain lists. So, yeah, that's about it, guys. There's a lot of directions we're going to be able to take the list. Don't think that this is like what I'm calling... I'm not saying this is the best list by any means. This is just my first draft of what I'm going to be working towards, running these cards that help me ramp to stay above, you know, going too low with my Dawn, but still allowing me to use my leader's ability as much as possible, right? That's the idea behind this deck. I'm going to hide behind blockers. I'm going to KO as much as I can with my leader. I'm going to try and starve my opponent out from their hand, like with cards like Isho or potentially even triggers from Great Eruption, but just KOing every single card they put down. Whatever card they put down, I want to KO it. And if, you know, with cards like Marco in the format, that's where I need to start thinking about cards like Top Knot, you know, and can I get around not running 4 ultis, 4 Ains, and 4 Udas, you know, 3, 4, 5 curve for my my Dawn ramp. But yeah, there's a lot to think about, a lot to still experiment with. Because I don't even have to go this direction, right? I can go for a more controlled version where I'm playing the Kuzans. I could go for a Navy version. I could go for a Dressrosa version, OP04. I could go for even a film version, a black-purple film version that's running Buena Fiesta and the new Uda from the new starter set. So, okay, guys, I just want to hear what y'all think about this. By all means, please share in the comment section below. Hope y'all enjoyed this kind of video. I really love doing these videos. I like to talk about deck building ideas. I like to talk about, you know, some combos that I think are going to be very strong that maybe no one else has thought of, or maybe people who have thought of it haven't shared it yet. You never know. But anyway, hope y'all enjoyed. Please don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe in the comment section below. Let me zoom out so y'all can see this. If you want to take a picture and mess with this deck list, by all means do. There we go. Actually, let me do it like this. There we go. And then if I go all the way down with this, then I can go like that. There we go. Sorry, guys. It's like I'm talking to myself, but all right. Hope you guys enjoyed again, and until next time, guys. Peace.